Morning, everyone. We're here for part three where we're going to talk about splashes. Didn't expect to make this so back to back to back, but hey, we're here. We're doing it. We're in the flow. So, we went through secures and extracts. We really didn't. We narrowed it down, but we didn't settle on anything. Like I said, this is a prep for a tournament in 6 weeks, so we got some time. We got testing to do. Things will evolve. Everything is interconnected with each other, as I've talked about, and as we go through this conversation and in future videos, we'll see how they kind of come together and where adjustments may be made depending on, as a secure or extract change, a splash changes or something like that. So in front of you, I have columns of threats and then obviously splash ideas below them. I also put the affiliated models. Um, I put in one color the ones who I actually like consider playing, and then I put the other colors the ones on the fringe ones who I don't really play, and I left off Strange and Moon Knight because they pretty much never make it, and there's not worth talking about them. Um, and I want to just preface this by saying, if you look at this and you say, "Wow, this model I really like to splash is in here," that's fine. This isn't exhaustive list. I put things here who I don't even think are that good, but I will at least talk about them, and maybe good or bad things I think about them. And there's ones that have come up to me in the past, and I'm sure there's other ones out there. Pretty sure I spelled Juggernaut wrong. Uh, I'm sure there's other ones out there that are really good. I mean, if you can utilize the bump and stuff, and it fits what you want to do, go for it. These are just ones that cross my mind and I've thought about or played. Let's just start at the easy two threats. The only one that ever splashed is Bullseye, and the only reason I'm giving Rocket a shout is because technically, if he bumps from the deployment and he's in front of a midline extract like a extremist, he can double tap it if they're on it. He's fine for holding back points. I think in the two threat world, we've talked about this where, when it comes to list building, you can choose Wong or you could choose Bullseye. I think you could choose both of them if you really want to run some two threat, double two setups, or you can choose none of them and just not have a two threat. And then, as long as your other splashes can make up for this, as far as like different threat levels, it doesn't matter. I think 18 is probably the big one that sticks out in my mind. That's like not having a two threat kind of sucks. Especially if you're trying to do a team like Blade, 5 threat, Eyehawk, and not having Wong or another 2 threat if you're going to take Werewolf to kind of fill out that team to 18. I think that if you want to go like 4-4-4-4-2, which is what setup I used to run on like Hammers, where you'd be like Blade, Voodoo, Gwenom, 4 threat, Wong. It's not so bad now because if you really want to do that, you could run 2 3s and just go 3-3 instead of 2-4. And because the other four was typically like Bill or something, like it's not really. I actually don't think like Bill Wong. It's probably like Mummy, Fist slash Lockjaw, whoever your Craven is or Panther is probably better than that anyway. So it's probably fine. Maybe it's a little weird on 19 threat because I also used to run like 4-4-3-4-4. And so now you like an idea would be to run 4-4-2-4-5, but you can't do that without two. I don't know. I don't know if the two threat really matters. I'll put it this way. I put Rocket there just for that shout. I wouldn't like a Koye Toad. None of those interest me enough. I mean, like a good Toad 2 threat, sure. Like I don't know when you're taking him. Maybe if you're doing like some weird super scenario setup where you take like Cat, Voodoo, Toad. I don't know. I'm just not in Suns. I mean, you can't argue with he's a great 2 threat, but I think Bullseye is the one. Bullseye, whatever. Bullseye is probably the one that. Is this Haste Switch or not? Or is it this? Anyway, Bullseye is the one I would probably play if I didn't play Wong. He's the one I would play if I have both. I haven't loved double 2 threat setups personally. The way I play, I find like having the two activations and like missing out on prio can sometimes feel bad, and they don't feel like they do enough. Or like just a better model would just be better, or a stronger compacted model would be better. So yeah, I think my list will end up being. I doubt I run two twos. It'll probably be either Wong Bullseye or none. If I really think about how I want to run three threats. So as you get more threats, they get more interesting. As least as Splash is concerned, there's not a whole lot of crazy things you can do with twos and bumps. I mean, Rocket with the turn one thing, Bullseye. Okay, it's just nice to like you basically can be out of range 5 of somebody and then bump in and like start attacking them. So you just have more effective range. He's not super power starved. Um, like he's not going to gain a ton of power, but like he can afford the bump and do his kit, right? He can bump, attack, do the I never miss if need to be done. Now it's nice if he has two power would be ideal going into the turn because you could bump, attack. I mean, the never miss would not have to then attack and then like hit and run backwards if you really wanted to. Like you bump off a point, double tap, hit and run back. Again, he's a two threat. He does damage. He's good against Shang, which is something that like Midnight Suns has issue with. I just like that he can do damage. Like you don't feel like you're sacrificing in activation of damage. He does damage closer to a three threat. Sure, he can go down easy, but you just accept that. Three threats. So obviously we have a couple 5 affiliated threes, and I think you're going to take 2 or 3 of them. I think your three threat needs to be not needs to, but probably should be like have a really strong purpose if you're going to take it. So I've already made a whole video on Lockjaw. Again, he's not locked in, no pun intended. But I am testing him, seeing if I like him. He is a safe grab. He can do a couple cool things. I've had people message me excited about him, and people telling me they saw him in action and he was bad. And honestly, here's my commentary on that. I don't trust anyone like most people's like play opinions on Lockjaw. To what I mean by that is, I think there's enough room where you could make mistakes and do stuff wrong or just have a weird analysis. I need to see it myself. It's not that I don't take their experience for something, but he's one of those that I feel like I actually need to play more myself and have my opinion on him. And if people don't like him, that is fine. And I'm very willing to be like, he just doesn't end up working. He has, he definitely has potential. But like, it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like you got to play him a certain way, and maybe people mess that up. Craven was one I really liked. I made a whole video on that as well. Maybe it was in some combination video, but he's good with bump because it turns on a lot of his kit. I went through the whole thing. He's a fun extra 3 splash. He probably starts to fall into the. One thing I was feeling with him back before all the monsters came out and Mummy on that, probably the one thing I felt with him is he's very good with bump. Like it really does turn him up a little, but it wasn't doing something like super weird or super unique. Like it made him more mobile and made his kit turn on a little bit more with like we've talked about with the whole he can hit his trigger thing and then he doesn't need to roll the wild evasive to do the extra move off his longer range one. I forgot the name of everything. He's just like a solid 3 that gets a little bit extra from bump and that's it. Like he's not like wrecking the world. He has some cool abilities, but like him, like Midnight Suns Craven versus not Midnight Suns Craven is, I guess maybe I don't know how big the gap is. The point I'm getting to make is like Lockjaw with the teleporting and the safe grabbing is like very unique. It's like a skill thing, not skill. It's a tool set that's way different, right? Craven's just like, if you could look at Craven versus Black Panther 3, for example, that's a good one. Where it's like, okay, they're not the same kit at all, but they are like rolling dice and like, okay, one has pounce, one has some extra movement on its attacks. One's affiliated, so that actually helps. Like he's a 5 health, 3 with 1 reroll. Like he's not. There's nothing crazy there. He's just a solid model, and it's one of those like with all these affiliated 3s. Like, do you really want to use a splash slot on him? I don't know. Probably not now. Probably not with Mummy. I probably wouldn't. Zemo, I mean. There's nothing. He's technically a safe grab with his card. He's a great 3 threat, though, to be honest. I feel way less. I know he's good, but I'm even way more down on him in, like, my convocation where I run him. Again, you can't argue. Like, some of these choices you'll see here are just because they're just good models. Some actually have bump synergy, but some are just like, oh, you're a good model, and you know, he's the perfect example, and I think Shang is actually the best example of, and it's been discussed on some of the discords and whatnot. I know some people Kane brought it up a lot. There's two Kanes, Kane and Kane Silencer or something. They're different people apparently, but they messaged me. The point being is, like, Gwenum versus Shang, and we'll get into that when we go fours. One is like, Shang is clearly the better four. Everyone splashes Shang. But Gwenum gets turned on by Bump, which I've also made videos on. And then what is better? The raw power of Gwenum or the Shang, or the Bump synergy of Gwenum? Like, to me, Shang doesn't get a ton out of Convocation, or out of, sorry, he gets more out of Convocation Bump. He doesn't get a ton out of Midnight Sun's Bump, because if you got 2 power, you're gonna, you know, it just I don't feel like, let me say this differently. My baseline is like everybody's decent with Bump, because, like, you get to move an extra range 1, right? It doesn't unlock anything for Shang per se. Like, he still has charge. Okay, he can arrange 1 place on a melee 2 model is whatever. Okay, he can do his flying kick from farther away, so maybe it saves him in action because he can bump and do his flying kick from range like 4. Sure, like, I'm not going to, yeah, but that's not some synergy you're like, oh my god, I'm so excited to have this. So to me, like, that's how Zemo feels. Like, okay, the one thing is he's a long mover, so turn 1 he can walk bump to a midline and then attack. So he has that going for him. That is something. But again, he kind of falls into that, like, Kraven range, where, like, Kraven at least gets a little bit cooler than Zemo, but Zemo is just like a good fast model that attacks. Like, he doesn't displace people, he doesn't do anything else cool. I put Ghost Spider here not because I would ever run her myself. I guess she has a synergy with Bump because of her basic attack. I put her here because there was this conversation in the Discords like a couple weeks ago about how she has the same name as Gwenum, and then people are like, I'm down on Gwenum, I'm going to take Ghost Spider. And I feel like it was such an unfair conversation to have, because they have, the only reason you would even compare those 2 models to each other, in my opinion, would be they have the same alias. But even if they had a different alias, like, you would never, in my opinion, run them together in Suns. So it's like a moot point. It's not like you're choosing one or the other and be like, oh, this alias is killing me. That's like comparing, maybe it's not fair, the 2 Peters, where one is clearly worse than the other. And you would, I mean, maybe Webs would run them together if they could. But I don't think Suns are running these 2 together, even if they were differently named. One's a 4 threat, one's a 2 threat, like, or 3 threat. They're just so different to me, other than, like, them being the same name. I don't understand. And I don't even think Ghost Spider gets that much out of Bump, because she needs her power to do her other things. Like, okay, if she's within range 2 for her double, like, builder thing, but that's such a different range than Gwenum. Like, Ghost Spider doesn't want, like, it's only range less than range 3, right? A Bump 1 with a 2-inch melee. So, like, the distance she gets, like, the reason Gwenum can be really nice with it is if you're over 4 away, you can bump in, attack, move, attack, get to where you need to go. Like, Ghost Spider, you'd have to be so close to the enemy to do this setup that she's just probably going to die because she's so fragile. Now, she's a good model. I'm not as high on her personally as a lot of people are. I just fucking kill her a lot of the time. I don't know why she's in consideration for Suns. Like, personally. Like, if you just like her as a model and you think she's one of the best 3 threats and you want to splash her, I guess I can't argue that. But there's nothing, like, it's like if Gwenum did, like, people brought it up because Gwenum existed and was like a solid splash in Suns, and then they were comparing the 2. But I'm like, why are you even talking about Ghost Spider? Like, if Gwenum didn't exist, I wouldn't all of a sudden want Ghost Spider in my sons. I've seen it before. I personally am not I'm not into it. I just don't see it. Again, I look at these 3 threats and I go, who does something interesting and is either affiliated or does something interesting? Okay, so we've talked about the affiliated ones. I think Mummy is the best one by far. Iron Fist, to me personally, does something interesting with his card and with his his big attack. That's like unique to his 3 threat. Like, there's no one that just can like turn the game. I mean, people can turn the game, but that's such an ability, like a game changing ability. And I look at Lockjaw, for example, and why I want to test him so much is I foresee his ability as like a game changing ability. Like, his setups and stuff can just really dictate the game much more differently. Crave and Zemo, great. They're good fighty 3s. Ghost Spider is a unique with their I don't know. I don't care about her. People might take her for like her displacement and stuff, and maybe say sons need it. And then obviously if you want to take BB3, fine. But like, I guess a lot of my setups too also don't need that many 3s. So like, I'm not spamming like 4 3s or something like that. So I'm only taking like 3 in my roster. So that's why it's like cut down. I'd rather go a little taller, for example. All right. So we went through 3s. 4 threats. One of the more interesting ones, we got Gwenum, who we've spoken about in videos. I've really liked her. I can see a world where people don't take her. I'm not going to force anyone to take her. I've liked her. I've also found that when people ask me like, "Oh, how do you use Gwenum?" I'm like, it's kind of hard to like explain it because she is so mobile. You are reliant on rolling some attacks, and sometimes you're just going to be like, "Shit, I didn't get the power I need." She's not as reliable, air quotes, in her play pattern, and I don't know. That's okay. Like, and I think one thing is I forced her into almost every single list when I started playing Suns. And I've learned that there are some cases, like, I don't really love her on E maps or stuff like that. Like, she's very good on Ds. So currently she's in my roster. She probably falters the most from, like, what's been changing around the list to where if I don't take Wong, it's very hard to take her at 18. If I don't take another 4, that's not Voodoo or her, it's hard to take her at 18. Like, she's hard to fit in some of the setups without Wong. And so that's more of the trouble I'm having currently, and not that I think she's bad. Also, like, there are matchups, like, if you're playing, she's bad against Shang, for example, just because he has blanks, and if you don't get the power to throw. And so I've played against teams of, like, Shang and Daredevil who count blanks, and you're just like, I can't do damage to anybody, this sucks. I think she's much better on like and that was like on an E map, so it was like even worse. So I think where she can really use her mobility on like infinities or D maps or something, she really does have a lot of play. So I think if you can get out of the mindset, or myself included, of like, okay, she's not an every game piece. Let's keep her for when she's useful. I think the problem I'm more having with her now is the setups, like fitting her into the proper setups, and I need to think about that more. Bill, Hela, or safe grabs. If you want a 4-threat safe grab, they are the boring answer. Some people swear by Hela, some people swear by Bill. I ran Bill if I had to choose between the two. But he isn't the cool option, and honestly, I'm probably off him as of right now. If I ever dropped Lockjaw, I probably would go back to Bill or Wrecking Crew. Wrecking Crew is a safe grab as well, because the big base bump plus their walk gets them there. They also have some really cool, like... let's just look up Wrecking Crew. This is the one I will bring the card up because I haven't talked about it much. This is one I actually would like to try. Big bumps and big bases and bumps are always good. They have stun. So again, they can get to the midline in one move with a bump. They start with 2 power, so they can safe grab or flip a point or something. They have a good attack that has a good chance to stun somebody on a hit. It's a gainer. They can hit the midline twice with a bump, so they can bump and do their little beam 2 times. It does reach the midline. A beam with a big base bump will reach the midline, just like Rocket makes it with his stupid thing. But they have the extra thing of they'll have 3 power after doing it because they gain a power for doing it. and then they could bulldoze forward. So like you could technically bump, beam, bulldoze into somebody and do 4 dice auto damage and be on the point. Um, they are probably one of the most interesting ones to splash right now, I think. In fact, it's kind of funny that one of my current rosters has like 3 or 4 safe grabs because I actually think some of the people who can safe grab are just interesting regardless. Um, to be completely honest, I would probably take Wrecking Crew over Bill and Hella. I think they're just fun and unique, and they can do some cool stuff. Being able to destroy terrain, get a lot of attacks, be a little bit more mobile, like generally speaking. You can do some fun things on hammers where, like, you can start in range of one of them, you can pick it up, walk, bump, and depending on the map, like if they're near the midline or something, you could double beam them, and maybe if it's over terrain, you get extra dice. You could do like 6 dice beam turned one. They seem pretty good with hammers. Stuff like that. They seem cool. I really would like to try them more, and they're definitely on my list of like I need to try them. Shang is here because like you can't go wrong with a generically good 4. That's really it. Like you could just take a 4 that's really good and just you wouldn't even have to think about it. You're like he's a good model. That's it. But yeah, like stun is really good against a lot of meta models like Namor and Thor 2. It's like no one's gonna complain about having an easy access to stun. Like I think 5 dice is 80% to hit stun, and so it's not auto. Like for how much like Nightcrawler's auto stun was like people were like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like they have a good chance to stun you as well, which can really start messing people up. So I like them. They have a good card too that can do a throw. 5 threats. 5 threats is where I feel like it really is the more defining, right? You can take a safe grab, you can choose to take Gwenum, you can choose to take Wrecking Crew. They define a little bit, but they're not as defining. I think which 5 threat splash you take, if one at all or if two multiple, probably changes your list a little bit more. So Namor is he's a meta 5 threat that can steal an enemy scroll and is a safe grab without needing bump. Like it's hard to. If somebody wanted to take him, I took him for a long time, though I don't think I ever used him in my roster. Like, all I can say is, sure, it looks cool. Sounds good. And I think because I always splashed Gwenum so much that it was hard to fit him in, so in those non-Gwenum ones, you could definitely take him. I mean, you can't really go wrong with him. And in him threatening the enemy scroll is always nice. I'll come back to Red Skull 2. Juggernaut, I think I see why people splash him because obviously with the big base bump you can get around a lot. Probably the thing I like least about Juggernaut in my head is that there are some bump plays. Like technically he could pick up 2 hammers because he could pick one up, walk, bump to the next one. The thing I like least about Juggernaut is that a lot of times bump is useful for getting you into position to do 2 attacks, right? That's a big thing. And Juggernaut, his natural kit is just good for walking, hitting, sliding. Like his kit is made to walk and attack. And so like bumping, like starting, like even if you start within range 2 of somebody with Juggernaut, a lot of times you walk to just do an 8 die versus a 5 die and then get into a better position and slide and stuff. So I guess what I mean by that is I feel like he doesn't actually get as much out of bump because he doesn't like want to, like he's not using that mobility as much as others. Sure, like listen, we can always go off the tangent of like, yeah, it helps him turn. I mean, he can get to the midline turn 1. Okay, he can't pick something up, but like if somebody's on the midline, he could walk, slide into him and get an attack. Like he doesn't need bump for that. And in fact, yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that. I think he is a great 5 threat. I feel like the excitement for him in Suns is less for me. Like, okay, there's some cool setups on like 16 Fisk where he can be there with Eyehawk and Blade and like 2 guys are immune to stun and Blade can shake it. And he's just a good model, but he doesn't like get me going with any of the stuff he does comparatively. So like A-Bomb is another Dracula. The Taco guys have covered it a lot. We've talked about a little bit of the problem where like range 3 is slightly bigger than bump plus range 2, but it does fix some of Dracula's problems with like range. Like you can get a little bit in for his like bow and stuff. Enough other people are testing that I am not interested in it. I think it'll work fine. I also think it has some limitations. Like you could make the argument of if you're gonna do it with Dracula, why not do it with Ultron 2? Right? Like if the benefit or the problem with Dracula is his like closing the gap and people throwing him away, like that's a similar thing that Ultron 2 has a problem with, and you can kind of make up for it with the bump as well, but Ultron 2 has more range. Like there's things on both sides. Like I mean, he hits harder, but Ultron 2 has more range, so like I don't know. That's I'm not the biggest proponent of Dracula myself, but he's also like he does open up those Thralls of Dracula team splashes. So you could like that is something that is kind of cool is if you do take him and you do say, okay, he is my 5-threat splash, but then like you need to pivot away from Blade for whatever reason, you can say, okay, now I can take Thralls and I can take Dracula, Werewolf, somebody else to cover my bases. A-Bomb. Let's go to A-Bomb. He's in the same box as Wrecking Crew. So the cool part about him, he can steal a scroll, the enemy scroll. He can actually steal the enemy hammer, which I think his name work into, which is kind of cool. He can get there. He can do some funny stuff with like Lockjaw and stuff. But just like, I guess the funniest thing too is if you take Wong, I guess you can double walk in and gamma bomb people or gamma radiation zone them and really like put down their early game power. And then he's like a big body that's not that easy to kill for some teams. Like Webb's trying to like poke at him is kind of annoying. He's one I really would like to try as well. I think he's one of the cooler ones to test because unlike Juggernaut, he benefits more from the bump as far. I mean, one, he's really fast, so like he can walk bump from D to D. But because of his 7 dice attacks, like he actually benefits from bumping into range and his his attack being over range 3 now because of that. Even if he does like a walk and is hurl debris just to get a power, and then there's things he can do. Gamma bomb into some, if he has 5 power, which he generates 2, and he has like the Rhino ornery thing, he could definitely, bump, get his spender off. Like it could definitely save him an action or 2. He's one of the cool ones. So I think he's going to be really good, period. Like I think he has a lot of strength in him. Having a throw is really nice. Again, like having a terrain throw in Suns can be really cool. Yeah, he's just really fast. He's really fast with bump. Like medium move, large base with a bump is super fast. It's pretty cool. I like him a lot. I do want to try him more. Red Skull 2 is the other one. I might have talked a little bit about him. He's an oldie but goldie type one. I know people have taken him before. I think the reason I'm most interested, he's a safe grab technically, and so is A-Bomb. The reason I'm most interested, or that I am at all interested in Red Skull 2 is the grunts. The soft like, them giving tokens to Mummy is kind of cool, but just, I think this idea of if you go Wongless, right? If you go Wongless, Red Skull 2 allows you to go 4 wide at like 16, 17 and still have 5 miles to contest. So if you're on Extremis at 8, 17, is that the point value I want to talk about? 4, 4, 3, 6. I guess you wouldn't go there. Let's say 17. Yes. No. 16. 17. 18. Whatever. Right? You go like Blade, Red Skull 2, Voodoo, Werewolf. That's 18 in this case. Or Mummy for 17, right? But those 4. Like, that's But with the grunts, you can have them sitting in the back. I talked about this the other day. If the grunts are in the back point, and whether it's the grunts or Wong, like who gives a shit? Like if they go dive him, they're just about as easy to kill. The grunts are range 4, so can actually put out some damage while they're back there. And if you kill the grunts, they can like appear next to Red Skull, like for the next turn, and they're not going to just get bodied by whoever's sitting back there. And they don't waste your activation. That's the big one. You basically get to have the 4 model worth of tall with 5 bodies for secures. And why that's so important is, like, if you've ever gone 5 wide against 4 wide with Wong as one of your 5, and you've just seen one of your models get taken down, and then you don't get priority, and then they get taken down again, it feels really bad. And Suns, in my opinion, do have a problem with like being kind of on the squishier side, so like not having prio can feel really bad. And so I could see how like Red Skull can maybe solve that issue, and so I'm testing him more. He's also pretty good. I mean, he's pretty nasty with Lockjaw, because like you can 2-tap somebody on the midline with your blanks, and depending on what you get, like you could be on the midline with them, because if you get the trigger to advance, you can go on the midline, or you're gonna end up with 1 power, because you'll teleport up, and then you'll have 1 power. You'll cut yourself for 2. So that's 3. You're gonna need 4 to take the shots, and you're gonna shoot twice, so you get 5 total. So you'll be at 1 power. If you get the trigger to move, you move on to the point, and if you need to shoot them, maybe they drop their extract because you killed them. But 2 6-die blanks attacks is very nasty turn 1. And so he is a safe route. I probably wouldn't use him for that unless I really need to. But I do think there's something there with like the grunts being helping you go tall for some scenarios, but also not counting for activations. He's also kind of cool because if you play him with Eyehawk, you can go in your no throw damage mode, and using him in the grunts, you can kind of keep the rest of your team safe from Eyehawk being thrown at you. Like you actually have some like play where you're like, screw it. It's very hard to. That does kind of suck, doesn't it? So I'm testing him the most. If I had to order these, it would be Red Skull, Abomination is my personal like excitement level, and some of it's just because Dracula and Namor are being very heavily tested by the Taco guys, and I trust them to some extent. I mean, you always got to trust yourself. They're good players. So I have less like drive to try them out as well. 6 threats. There's 3 6 sets I put here, 6+ threats. I mean, normal or Hulk, we already have him. He kind of goes against like taking Hulk. I think the problem is, I think there are setups where he's pretty good because you can't take him with Immortal Hulk, but just being 1 threat less kind of helps out. You're probably not splashing him because you're probably just going to take Immortal Hulk for most cases. He's anything like a threat play where it's kind of nice to be 6 instead of 7 for some of the teams. Like if you want to go Blade him, double 3 for 16 or something instead of a 2, or if you had Eyehawk. But I'm not. I'm just putting him here because he's a 6 threat who's good. Thor 2 and Clock. So Clock's is Namor with Time Gem. I absolutely am not on board with this pick. Like, it's not that I don't think I don't get it. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. Like, why? He can pick up 2 viruses, but he can do that in any team. Bump does not enable that. I don't know what Bump enables with this. I mean, he's more mobile, generally speaking. He gets more power, generally speaking. But I don't see in my mind where he gets like this. He can pick up 2 hammers. You can walk to one, walk back, and bump to the next one. So, like, okay, I guess it doesn't matter. Okay, one of the more interesting things you can do is you can get 2 hammers and be on your back point and have charge power for the next turn. There you go. That's something cool. He can pick up 2 viruses, which he can do anywhere, and have bump power, have charge power for the next turn. I don't know. I'm sure there's uses for him. I don't know. I don't like that. Whatever. I'm sure the taco guys will talk about him at some point. I know Bots has been like testing him. Maybe they have setups with like for like other like lower point values or Dracula splashes, where it's like Dracula clocks and a 4 threat at 15 or something like that. I think I've seen that before. Um, I'm just not on it. Part of me is just like, just take Thor 2 and like just go kill everybody, right? Like Thor with bump is pretty freaking good as well because it really helps you get around people. Like it closes the gap of range. Like people, the whole one of the big things about Thor is if you attack him at range 4, he's out of pounce range. He's out of attack range. He basically has to walk to he could pounce at you and get double tapped. But with bump, it turns his pounce into range 5, just under range 5, because his pounce is 7. His pounce is about 7 inches, and then the bump is about 3 inches. But we've talked about it's a little bit less than 3 inches. So, like, he can bump around things. That's another thing too. Like, if you think like you've body blocked him, he might be able to bump around you and then pounce at somebody. So, like, if anything, Thor 2 seems like the best splash at 6+ threat. Like, he does a ton of damage. Like, I hate to say it, but if I was going to splash a 6 threat, I'd splash Thor 2. That's just straight up. That's my opinion. I would splash Thor 2. He does way more damage to me. Like, he's not as shifty as Clocks is, but like, just, it's that, it feels like that meme from Indiana Jones where like the guy's swinging his sword around and that's Clocks, and then like Indiana Jones just shoots him. Like, that's Thor 2, in my opinion. That's my thought there. I don't even take any of them. I don't have a 6+ threat splash right now, but it would be Thor 2 if I had to pick. He's also, I think Bots mentioned this to me, he's also like weirdly really good in the mirror because we are on the weaker side to energy. So like Thor can really fuck up Blade, and he's also okay against Shang. Of course, 3 dice with blanks against 7 energy or the ping damage is probably not going to save Shang. So like we don't have like an amazing anti-Shang in our roster. So that helps. So the Red Skull 2 grunts, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of like my just talk on Splash. Hopefully that was interesting. There's always ones out there. I've heard of weird things like Black Dwarf because he has a big base. Rhino because he gets so much movement and stuff. There are definitely the ones out there that aren't just these. So go try stuff. I think the one thing in Suns that I need to get I'm so used to in Convocation, like I almost never take more than minimum affiliated models in my roster. And that thinking needs to go away a bit in Suns because you get Siege. Like Siege is such a big card, and even Bats to some extent is such a big card that like you inherently get value from having them be affiliated. And so, I shouldn't be afraid to go Mummy, Iron Fist, Blade, Voodoo, instead of like I have to splash a 3. They can't be Iron Fist. It can't be him. It can't be Voodoo. I have to take Wrecking Crew or Shang instead of Voodoo. Or some setup like that, or Werewolf by Night over one of the other 5s, or I can't take them. So to me, being affiliated isn't bad, and I think you're taking 6 to 7 affiliated in Suns, and then you're really picking 3 splashes for certain situations, and it's hard to fit them all. So I mean that's really what it comes down to, and the big question is threat math. I think you can go here and say, okay, I want Lockjaw, I want Gwenum, I think my list currently has 4 splashes, and it's this. No, it's not that. It's these. I think Wrecking Crew's technically in there, but that's probably the spot that would be like either Wong, Bullseye, Wrecking Crew, Thor 2, or A-Bomb. I don't know if you can run 3 5s in this roster. Probably not. So it gets weird. Like I think Red Skull 2, Lockjaw and Red Skull 2 are very polarizing splashes in that they drastically change how you can compose a team and first turn setup type stuff. And I again and am not I'm going to say I am not 100% sold on either one, but like I guess put it this way: if you were debating between Craven or Zemo, like it whatever, right? Like it doesn't drastically change anything. You're like, I'm going to take a Fighty 3 that does something. That to me doesn't change much. The difference between like having a setup with Lockjaw and Red Skull 2 actually changes fundamentally like how you build rosters and setups. And so that's why it's such a big decision. I really like A-Bomb. And in fact, if anything, I think A-Bomb's really cool, and can do some fun stuff. But then A-Bomb makes me want to take Wong so I could give him power turn 1 and double walk and gamma radiation zone people. Thor 2 makes me want to take Wong more because you can get the pounce turn 1, which is not unique to Suns. Anyone can do that. But, he's so good with the pounce early that, you use the bump later on for other things. So yeah, that's kind of like why it becomes hard and why we need to do more testing. And I hope to get some more games. And thanks for listening.